In a quiet village nestled between green hills, Amaka was known far and wide for her cooking. Every morning, the air around her home was filled with the delightful scent of freshly cooked meals. Steaming bowls of pounded yam, spicy pepper soup, and fried plantains. The villagers would line up at her food stall, eager for a taste of her cooking. Amaka's food brought comfort to everyone, especially since she had been the sole provider for her family after her husband passed away. She had become the heart of the village, feeding not only her family but also anyone in need, and her kindness made her loved by all. But despite her success, Amaka's peaceful life was about to change. One day, a mysterious fat woman named Nneka arrived in the village. She set up her food stall just down the road from Amaka's. At first, the villagers were curious about her food, but what seemed like harmless interest soon turned into something more. Nneka's food, strange yet irresistible, drew the villagers away from Amaka's table. Slowly, her customers began to disappear, leaving Amaka to wonder what was happening. Her heart sank each day as fewer and fewer people came to her stall. Nneka's popularity grew, and soon, husbands abandoned their wives' home-cooked meals, choosing the unknown woman's food instead. Amaka watched in disbelief as her life's work began to crumble. The day Nneka arrived, the village was buzzing with excitement. She was unlike anyone the villagers had ever seen. Tall, round, and dressed in bright, flowing robes that made her stand out. She carried herself with a confidence that was both intriguing and intimidating. Without much talk, she rented a small shed near the marketplace and transformed it into a food stall overnight. The villagers were fascinated, especially when the tantalizing aroma of her food began to fill the air. Her cooking smelled different from anything they had known, a strange mix of spices that awakened cravings they didn't even know they had. Nneka didn't advertise her food. She didn't have to. The villagers found themselves drawn to her stall, unable to resist the allure of her meals. Her portions were generous, her prices low, and her demeanor friendly but guarded. It didn't take long before her stall was crowded daily, with people eager to taste her dishes. They sang her praises, claiming her food was the best they had ever eaten. Some even joked that Nneka must have magical hands. But while the villagers celebrated their new discovery, Amaka watched from a distance, her heart heavy with worry. At first, Amaka tried to ignore the situation. She told herself that her loyal customers would return, that this was just a passing phase. But as days turned into weeks, it became clear that something was wrong. Her once busy stall was now almost empty. She overheard whispers about Nneka's food being too good to resist. Some men even bragged about skipping meals at home just to eat at Nneka's place. Amaka felt a deep sense of loss, not just for her business but for the community that once cherished her. Amaka's life changed drastically as Nneka's influence grew. Her daily routine, once filled with the joy of cooking for her customers, became a lonely chore. She would prepare her meals in the early morning, hoping for a miracle, but by noon, her stall would still be empty. The few customers who stopped by offered words of sympathy, but their loyalty was fleeting. Amaka began to feel invisible in the very village where she had once been celebrated. Financially, things became dire. With no steady income, Amaka struggled to provide for her children. The money she had saved over the years dwindled quickly, and she often went to bed hungry just to make sure her children were fed. The shame of her situation weighed heavily on her. She avoided the marketplace as much as she could, not wanting to face the pitiful looks of those who had once admired her. Meanwhile, Nneka's stall thrived. The villagers flocked to her as if under a spell, and her popularity seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. Amaka couldn't understand it. How could one woman's food cause such a shift in the village? There was something unnatural about it, but whenever she voiced her concerns, people laughed and dismissed her as jealous. Amaka's unease about Nneka grew with time. It wasn't just her business that was suffering. The village itself seemed to change. There were rumors about people going missing, travelers, strangers, even some locals. At first, the disappearances were dismissed as coincidences, but as the numbers grew, whispers of something darker began to circulate. Amaka noticed other strange things too. Nneka was always cheerful during the day, but at night, her stall remained lit, and eerie sounds could be heard from within. Some said they saw shadows moving when no one should have been there. Amaka's instincts told her that Nneka was hiding something, but whenever she brought it up, people waved her off. "You're just bitter because her food is better than yours," they said. Determined to find answers, Amaka began observing Nneka from a distance. She noticed how Nneka avoided personal questions and never allowed anyone to see where she lived or prepared her meals. The more Amaka watched, the more convinced she became that Nneka's success was not natural. But without proof, what could she do? One evening, Amaka gathered the courage to speak up. She went to the village elders and shared her concerns about Nneka. She spoke of the strange sounds, the missing people, and her suspicion that Nneka's food was connected to it all. But instead of taking her seriously, the elders laughed. "Amaka," one of them said gently, "your heart is heavy with jealousy. Focus on rebuilding your business and leave Nneka alone." Amaka's heart broke. She realized she was alone in her fight. Even her closest friends avoided her, not wanting to be seen as taking sides. Her warnings became the talk of the village, but not in the way she had hoped. People gossiped about her bitterness and joked about her wild imagination. Yet, deep down, Amaka knew she was right. She just needed to find a way to prove it. As the days passed, Amaka's desperation grew. She prayed for guidance, asking the spirits of her ancestors to reveal the truth. She decided to take matters into her own hands, but she knew it would be dangerous. If Nneka was indeed hiding a dark secret, exposing it could put Amaka's life at risk. Late one night, Amaka decided to investigate Nneka's stall. Armed with nothing but a small lantern, she crept through the shadows, her heart pounding in her chest. When she reached the stall, she peered through a crack in the wooden door and saw something that made her blood run cold. Inside, Nneka was chopping meat. Not the usual cuts from goats or chickens, but something that looked disturbingly human. Amaka stumbled back, her mind racing. She had to warn the village, but she needed more proof. She hid behind a tree and watched as Nneka carried a large sack to the back of the stall. When Nneka disappeared, Amaka crept closer and opened the sack. Inside, she found human bones, some still covered in flesh. A wave of nausea overtook her, but she forced herself to stay calm. The next morning, Amaka went to the marketplace and shared what she had seen. At first, people were skeptical, but as the missing villagers' names were mentioned, fear began to spread. The villagers realized that Amaka's warnings might hold some truth, and a group was formed to confront Nneka. The village became tense after Amaka's revelation. People whispered nervously among themselves, sharing stories of loved ones who had mysteriously disappeared. Every corner of the market buzzed with rumors, and the once vibrant village seemed overshadowed by fear. Husbands who had spent evenings at Nneka's stall suddenly stopped visiting, their wives forbidding them from eating her food. Nneka, however, remained calm. She went about her business as usual, smiling warmly at her customers, as though unaware of the suspicions surrounding her. Some villagers were still hesitant to believe Amaka's story. They claimed she had fabricated the tale out of jealousy. If Nneka is guilty, they argued, where is the proof? But others couldn't ignore the pattern of missing villagers or the strange sounds that some swore they'd heard at night. Gradually, more people began to question the newcomer. Fear turned into anger, and the villagers decided they needed to act before anyone else disappeared. Amaka's courage became an inspiration. Once ridiculed, she was now seen as the voice of reason. Though she was terrified, she joined the group preparing to confront Nneka. The plan was set. They would raid her stall in the early morning when she least expected it. Armed with tools and lanterns, the villagers braced themselves for the truth, no matter how horrifying it might be. Before dawn, the villagers gathered in silence, their breaths visible in the cold morning air. The group moved cautiously toward Nneka's stall, their footsteps muffled by the dirt road. When they arrived, they found the stall dark and locked. Undeterred, the men broke down the door, their torches illuminating the interior. What they found inside was beyond their worst nightmares. The room was filled with human remains, bones stacked in corners, blood-stained utensils, and sacks of flesh hidden beneath tables. The villagers recoiled in horror, some covering their mouths to keep from screaming. Nneka's so-called special ingredients were laid bare before them. The once bustling stall that had brought joy to so many was now revealed as a place of unspeakable evil. As the villagers processed the gruesome scene, Nneka appeared at the doorway, her face twisted in a sinister grin. She didn't try to deny her actions. Instead, she laughed, mocking them for their ignorance. "You all enjoyed my food, didn't you?" she sneered. "Now you see the price of your greed." Her words sent chills down their spines, but their fear quickly turned to rage. The villagers, united in their fury, seized Nneka and dragged her to the village square to face justice. In the village square, a crowd gathered, their faces etched with anger and betrayal. Nneka stood in the center, her once commanding presence now diminished. She showed no remorse, her defiance fueling the villagers' outrage. For years, she had preyed on their trust, turning their loved ones into her gruesome meals. Now, justice would be served. The elders, who had once dismissed Amaka's warnings, addressed the crowd. They admitted their mistake in ignoring her and praised her bravery for exposing the truth. "We failed you," one elder said, his voice heavy with guilt. "But today we will right this wrong." The villagers roared in agreement, their anger boiling over. With stones in their hands, they began the grim task of delivering justice. Nneka's laughter turned to screams as the villagers took turns punishing her. The act was brutal but cathartic, a way for the community to cleanse itself of the horror she had brought upon them. When it was over, the village fell silent, the weight of what they had done settling over them. Nneka's reign of terror was finally over, but the scars she left would remain. In the days that followed, the village began to heal. The remains found in Nneka's stall were given proper burials, and prayers were offered for the souls of the departed. The villagers came together in mourning, united by their shared grief and guilt. But amidst the sadness, there was also a sense of relief. The nightmare was over, and the village could finally begin to rebuild. Amaka, once shunned and ridiculed, was now celebrated as a hero. Her stall, which had been deserted for so long, was once again bustling with customers. The villagers, eager to support her, formed long lines to taste her cooking. Amaka's food, filled with love and care, brought comfort to the community, reminding them of the goodness that still existed. Her kindness and resilience had saved the village, and she was finally given the recognition she deserved. Though the memory of Nneka's crimes lingered, the village chose to focus on the future. They learned to value the simple joys of life and the importance of standing together in times of hardship. Amaka's story became a lesson for generations to come, a reminder that courage and truth will always prevail, even in the darkest times. Peace was restored, and the village thrived once more, with Amaka at its heart.
Please like and subscribe for more enchanting stories like this. Bye. See you on my next video.